Welcome back. You're watching The Conversation Chamber, brought to you by the Bermuda Chamber of Commerce.
One of the things that's been really difficult to answer is how many people are here? How is that changing? Where are they going? Why are they going? So let's start off first with the birth and death rate.
Yeah, so let's go like from a high view on this and take it right back. So we're going back to 1978 here, Mariko, and we're going to see how Bermuda's actually trended over time now. And what we can see is that from 2008 onward, we have had a massive drop off of births in Bermuda. Now, on top of that, we have to remind that not all the births that are happening in Bermuda are actually to Bermudian parents. So when we look at Bermudian births, it's about 80% or so of that. So that's represented in this orange line that we have. Now, the key part is this crossed over in 2013 between the birth rate and death rate when we look at Bermudian births. So from 2013 onward, we've actually had a negative spread.
More people dying than we have babies being born.
Correct, on the Bermudian side of it.
So we got this black line, which actually shows that we have a lot more deaths. I mean, it is what it is, right? People are sort of living longer, and therefore the death rate is going to catch up with it somewhere. But then there is that COVID.
Yep, the COVID spike, and when we're not experts on the death rate side here, but when we just take a simple average over the 5 years prior to COVID, it looks like that over the last 3 years, the deaths have actually been about 25% above that average rate that we would have seen. So that's kind of reflective of what COVID has contributed, what COVID has caused to our death rate in Bermuda.
Sure, and the big issue isn't really the death rate. The big issue is the Bermudian births. There just aren't enough babies coming online. I mean, we had 380. This is an all-time low. So if you take that 380 coming online, that's a really bad term, really. But if you talk about 380 births, what does that mean for schools?
Yep. So again, we've taken it right back, 1978.
Yep.
And looking at what this means going forward. So you can see that the total school age population that Bermuda's had has dropped from 10,800 to 7,000 over this time period. And within that, we've also
for students.
Yes, correct. Yep. And this is across all the age groups. So we can see that there's a reduction on what our school age populations are too. And obviously, this is our future pipeline as we look at it from a workforce development.
Where do you think those kids went? I mean, from 8,800 in public school to 3,719 now. I mean, okay, there's some people being homeschooled, but
they'll still be in that number.
They'll still be in the hopes. Oh yeah, in the government school number.
They'll be in one of them.
Okay, so then somebody must be going away.
But it's also reflective of the birth rate too.
The birth rate's going to be inside there. We're taking some kids and putting them into some sort of schools overseas. And then that private school number is just growing. It looks like there might be
relatively stable.
Yeah.
But yes, I think what you're seeing is it's a reflection, it's a proxy for the people on the island. So you might have some impact on average family size, driving it down. And then you're also going to have an impact of less people on the island, less workforce, less all of that. So I think you're going to have those two overlapping trends. And you can see it sort of here where we look at the demographic shifts. You can see that play out. Then the less school-age kids, 10 years later, they're the less under 35-year-olds in the workforce, right? So the one line turns into the next line, which then turns into the next line, just sort of in 10 years, 15 years later.
Yeah, and I think on that too is just when we look at the median age of the workforce here, if we go back to 99, it was about 39.6 years old, and now it's at 47 years old. We've only progressed 23 years, and it's almost doubled in that time frame. That just shows how much of a shift we've seen from that 35 and under and the 35 to 44 age brackets shifting upward. And now we're seeing that over 55%, almost 55% of our workforce is actually 45 or older now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I wonder what that really means. I mean, changes in technology, the older we get, sometimes it's a little harder to keep up with that change in technology. What does that mean when we give service, when somebody's stepping up and there's a senior? Not to say that seniors can't do. That's not the case. It's just, what is the expectation of service, and what's the expectation of lifting things up and moving things? Or how do we want to serve people? Or what does our guests expect in terms of how we're going to serve them? We are not tapping into young people.
There's also, I think, there's multiple factors there that are driving this picture, right? But you also have changes in the job market itself. So if you have more senior level positions and you have through changes in technology or through changes in automation, you have less entry-level or mid-level jobs inside an organization, or you've got more smaller organizations than you had before, whether it's in the IB space or the local space, then the fewer entry-level jobs are going to drive fewer people in the younger ages in those jobs. That may mean that it's fewer guest workers in that age bracket. It may mean that there are that Bermudians are not finding work in those categories. But there's certainly more to dig into and more questions to be asked.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that too, is when we think about that school age question that we're just looking at the schools, you can also see, because obviously the most of the childbearing population is going to be 44 and under. And we can see that that's shrinking as we've gone through the curve. So that's also just that contribution factor on top of it. But this is also a near-term issue that we're going to be seeing playing out over the next 5 years even, because of pensions, the discussion about how that's going to be managed going forward, because obviously the bulk of our workforce that is going to be carrying that weight going forward is in that smaller percentage now.
Yeah, we're not going to actually jump into healthcare, but it is actually true that 80% of your healthcare spend that you're going to spend in your life is in the last 20% of your life. So I actually wonder if any of these numbers in the 65-year-old category, is that people having to work longer, or because the population requires it, or because they need to have more money in their pocket? What's actually happening with them socially at home? Mm-hmm. The other thing I actually wonder is, do we actually have more kids going overseas to school and maybe just aren't coming back as fast? Maybe there's more opportunity out there. I don't know if there's more money or they're enjoying the world. There's a lot of questions. We got to dig into that data a little bit more.
So if we then move on to the looking at the total number of jobs filled in Bermuda, you can see how it sort of flows on from the death rate, the birth rate, the demographic shifts. They all kind of tie together because obviously they're measuring different facets of the same thing. But the interesting piece here is that we have certain levels of expectations around what we want from our infrastructure. We want a reliable, robust electrical supply. We want reliable, robust medical system. We have, a certain size of government. We have all of this big picture infrastructure that is now being paid for by fewer and fewer people working. So that denominator impact is a very real thing and plays a significant role into our cost of living, because we're taking these big numbers, dividing them by fewer people, so each person's individual share of the pot is getting bigger.
So we need more people so we can all pay less.
Well, we need to make a decision. In some ways, nobody wants to look in the mirror and say we want less service.
Oh, I see.
So you can approach it from either way. It's an equation that has two parts. You can either have a less robust, less reliable electrical service. You can have a hospital that does less things for less people. You can have a smaller government, or you can increase the number of people that are paying for things.
Or we can increase the price.
Well, the price flows from those two pieces of the equation.
So if we don't get more people, we're going to end up having to pay more. If we don't pay more, we might end up having less services.
Yep, exactly.
So it's either a very negative thing or it's a very positive thing, depending on which side that you're on and the decisions that are being made.
I think it's like everything else. You're striving to find the most appropriate balance for Bermuda, for the economy, for the social economic fabric of our society.
So do we fill a pothole? Do I take a payout? Do we get a cash benefit by not paying an additional tax, or do we get more tax so we can actually pay the pothole, fill the pothole?
That's the question.
So we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back and we're going to talk about retail sales.
Conversation Chamber will be back after these messages.